Hi, I'm Mark Dillon, and this is Jay Mundy, and we're with Biomed Sciences. And we're going to demonstrate for you some of the techniques and some tips and hints about forming face masks with transparent thermoplastic material. And we're going to demonstrate two things. First, the use of this technique with just ordinary thermoplastic, and then secondly, we'll demonstrate it with the use of Silon-STS, which is a combination of thermoplastic and silicone sheeting. This is the vacuum forming apparatus, and it consists of a vacuum pump connected through a pipe up to the top of which we call the pedestal head, and it has a tube which is the exhaust of the vacuum pump. So when this device is on, it's sucking air from the center of the pedestal head, and it's blowing air out of the end of this nozzle. Now, there's two pieces of weather stripping on top of the pedestal head, and the purpose of that is to keep the mold up off of the bottom so that it doesn't plug the vacuum hole. Because the vacuum is coming out from around the edge of the mold. Now, we often suggest that you drill holes through the eyes, but this isn't for the purpose of the entire vacuum forming. It assists if you have a mold that has a lot of contours in this area and you get a tight seal around the perimeter of the mold first, you may get a little less detail into this area. So the holes through the eyes help, but they're not necessarily critical for every type of mold. They can also be helpful at the end of the process when it's time to remove the mask off of the mold. You can use the exhaust stream from the vacuum pump to blow into the hole. And if you block the opposite one at the same time, you can sometimes help get the mask to pop off. So we're going to take a piece of thermoplastic. This is plain thermoplastic without the Silon on it. I'm removing the protective plastic liner from it and placing that on top of the flat panel heater. I'll then use these gloves to monitor the softening process. So I can see as it's laying here that it's beginning to soften in the center where it's making contact with the heater. And I will massage this with my hands so that that heating process happens evenly across the face of the heater. So I'm less concerned about the amount of time that the thermoplastic is on the heater face. I'm more concerned with that it's softening uniformly over the area that's being heated. Now, one thing that we see sometimes with plain thermoplastic is that if it's overheated, you can get bubbles or streaks that happen in the center of the sheet. That's happening because the thermoplastic is against the heater face and is getting too hot. That tends not to happen when we're using a sheet of Silon-STS, particularly if you put it with the silicone surface down against the heater. If you're using this type of heater panel with plain thermoplastic instead of Silon-STS, we recommend that you turn the temperature down a little bit. But as long as you're massaging the surface and you can feel where it's softening, that's the real indicator of when it's ready to form. All right. Now we take this. And notice we're pulling it down over top of the mold, and we're making contact. What's important is that we make contact around the edge, and that's where the vacuum then forms. What what you want to make sure you don't do is have a wrinkle in the plastic when you're doing the forming process. So let me turn this on. Because if you have a wrinkle when you push it down like this, that allows air to escape underneath of the thermoplastic and it spoils the vacuum. So you notice we didn't have to pull down real hard. In fact, pulling down real hard works against you because it tends to create wrinkles. We just let it sit down onto the face of it. Now with this particular piece, if you can see on the camera here, there's some white bubble marks in the thermoplastic where it's a little bit rough. And that's a result of the plastic being too hot on the surface of the heater panel. So when you're working with plain thermoplastic, we recommend that you turn the temperature down about 25 degrees or so to 300 degrees Fahrenheit approximately with plain thermoplastic. Now, if we're working with Silon-STS, we have a paper protective liner covering the surface of the silicone. And again, we have the clear plastic liner on the back. So if we place this with the Silon side down against the heater, we tend not to have a problem with those white marks that may show up in the thermoplastic. I'll do the same thing by massaging this piece until I can feel that it's soft everywhere. It takes a little longer to get soft because the silicone is absorbing heat. And again, I'm not so concerned about the amount of time. I'm really monitoring how soft it becomes. See, it's flexible here, but it's still hard on the edges. This is about ready to go, so we'll turn that on, Jay. And we'll do the same thing. Let that cool a little bit. And a damp cloth just to cool it off. Now, one of the techniques of helping to remove the mask from the mold is to use the air hose. So I'll put that into one eye hole, block the other, and it helps pop it off. Then once you have this piece, you can trim it with shears. Now, one thing to pay attention to if you're doing it this way is that as you're working the mold, you're working the mask, what you don't want to do is hit the inside of the mask with the shears because you will scratch the silicone. So you just need to be a little bit careful about how you're cutting and how you're trimming the mask. Then There are a number of approaches to removing the mask from the mold. One is to use a razor knife to cut around the perimeter. Another technique is to use a Dremel tool and cut around the perimeter. And this tool has the metal edge on it that's like a drill bit instead of the sandpaper type of grinding wheel, because those types tend to clog up and they don't cut as effectively. Particularly if there's an undercut in the mold. Now this one isn't very bad, but sometimes you end up with the mold is shaped like this, and that ends up holding the mask onto the face of the mold. So you can use a Dremel tool to cut away from that undercut so that you can pop the plastic up. And what we can do with this mask here. Now, if this were a sharp undercut and we were having difficulty pulling this mask off, you can cut away the undercut by cutting into the mold. And that way you could remove the undercut piece. And then, of course, when you're finished, you use a Dremel tool to cut out the eyes, an opening for the mouth and nostrils, and attach a strap or Velcro, and end up with your final mask. So we hope that information is helpful with these few tips and hints that we've been able to provide. And as always, you can call us at 800-257-4566 or 825-Silon if you have any questions or if we can be of any help. Thank you.